Good morning. This is XPulse AI Morning Mix. It's Thursday, April 16th, 2026. Today, Anthropic's new Mythos model draws scrutiny, investors float an eye-watering valuation, and the infrastructure race keeps getting weirder and more vertical. I've got Orion with me, ready to jump in?
Absolutely, let's do it.
The Hill reported on April 14th that Anthropic's limited release of its Mythos frontier model is putting regulators, banks, and Washington on alert. Orion, what set this off?
Anthropic itself warned Mythos could be misused, especially for cyber attacks. With a limited rollout, the worry is even small acts can enable big harm if the capability is strong. So you're seeing U.S. officials and financial institutions start asking about oversight, access limits, and how risk is being monitored.
Are banks reacting because of fraud risk or something broader?
Broader. Fraud is the obvious one, but banks think in systems: credential theft, automated phishing, malware assistance, even supply chain attacks against vendors. If a model meaningfully lowers the cost of advanced attacks, compliance and cyber teams don't wait for headlines. They preemptively tighten third-party and tool access policies.
So do we end up with frontier models but behind velvet ropes?
That's the direction. Limited release is already a form of control. The new piece is external pressure from regulators and critical industries to make the controls auditable, enforceable, and consistent across vendors, not just trust us, we're careful.
Bloomberg reported on April 14th that Anthropic has investor offers for a funding round, valuing it at about $800 billion or more, though it's resisted so far. Orion, $800 billion.
Yeah, my calculator asked for a break. The headline is less deal done and more demand is extreme. Investors are trying to secure exposure to frontier labs the way they once chased the biggest cloud platforms, except now compute, models, and distribution are converging into a single strategic asset.
If Anthropic keeps resisting, what's the strategic play? Stay independent or wait for better terms?
Both. Resisting can signal confidence and preserve leverage with strategic partners. It can also reflect governance constraints and long-term safety posture. But at valuations like this, every funding round becomes de facto geopolitics. Who gets influence, who gets access, and what kind of deployment promises get attached.
Does that kind of valuation change competitive behavior day to day?
It can. It raises expectations, faster releases, more enterprise penetration, more compute locked in, and it nudges the whole market upward: talent comp, supplier pricing, and the arms race feel, because everyone recalibrates what a frontier position is worth.
TechCrunch reported on April 14th, citing Bloomberg, that AI data center startup Fluidstack is in talks to raise about $1 billion at an $18 billion valuation, potentially led by Jane Street. First, what's the news here?
They're discussing a big jump in valuation tied to demand for AI-specific data centers. The report also notes Fluidstack recently secured a $50 billion deal to build data centers for Anthropic, which is a massive anchor customer signal, if that deal scales the way it sounds.
For anyone who doesn't track data center startups, what does Fluidstack actually do?
They focus on purpose-built infrastructure for AI workloads: high-density power, advanced cooling, fast networking, and deployment speed. Think less generic colocation and more bring up a cluster, fast, at the edge of what the grid can handle. That's why the capital needs are huge.
And Jane Street potentially leading? Does that matter?
It suggests sophisticated underwriting and comfort with complex infrastructure risk. AI data centers are becoming financial products as much as buildings: long-term contracts, power hedging, and utilization risk. Getting that right can be the difference between printing cash and owning very expensive heat.
Financial Content reported on April 15th that Meta and Broadcom extended a multi-year partnership to develop custom silicon for Meta's AI infrastructure, with TSMC expected to benefit as foundry. Orion, what's Meta trying to buy with this move?
Control over cost, supply, and performance. Custom accelerators can be tuned to Meta's model architectures and serving patterns. It also reduces dependency on any single external chip vendor. Even if they still buy off-the-shelf GPUs, bespoke silicon can absorb parts of training, inference, or ranking workloads.
No financial terms were disclosed, so how do we read the impact?
The signal is commitment. Multi-year extensions mean roadmaps, co-design, and capacity planning. For the ecosystem, it reinforces a trend: hyperscalers are building semi-vertical stacks, model, runtime, silicon, and data center, because that's where the durable margin and reliability live.
Does this squeeze smaller labs?
It can. If big platforms lock up foundry capacity and packaging, it raises the floor for everyone else. Smaller labs either partner, pay more, or get creative, like specializing, sharing infrastructure, or relying on cloud providers that already have those supply relationships.
Wired reported on April 14th that Anthropic is opposing an Illinois bill, SB 3444, that OpenAI backs aimed at limiting AI liability. What's the disagreement?
Anthropic's public argument is that the bill would largely shield AI companies from responsibility for catastrophic harms. OpenAI's support implies it sees liability limits as necessary for innovation or predictable risk management. The split is notable because it's two top labs disagreeing on the rules of the road.
If you're a policymaker, what's the hard part here?
Defining catastrophic, assigning fault across a chain of actors, and not creating perverse incentives. If liability is too strict, you chill deployment and open source work. If it's too lax, you externalize real harm. The details, standards of care, auditing, and exceptions matter more than the slogans.
Do you expect more public fractures like this between labs?
Yes. As the money and stakes grow, AI safety stops being a single banner and becomes competing policy preferences, especially when those policies affect competitive advantage, compliance cost, and who bears risk when something goes wrong.
Google announced on April 14th that Google.org and the Johnson & Johnson Foundation are launching a $10 million initiative to train rural U.S. healthcare workers in $5 million each. Orion, what's included?
It's AI literacy training plus grants and pilot support for rural clinics. The emphasis is operational, reducing administrative burden and improving workflows for clinical and administrative staff. That usually means documentation assistance, scheduling, billing support, triage workflows, less magic doctor bot, more make the day survivable.
What makes rural clinics a distinct target?
They're often understaffed, resource-constrained, and juggling fragmented systems. Small improvements in throughput and paperwork can have outsized impact. But it also raises the bar on procurement and risk management, because small organizations may not have deep security and governance benches.
So the success metric isn't flashy demos, it's hours saved?
Exactly. If it measurably reduces time spent on admin tasks without increasing errors or privacy risk, it sticks. If it adds yet another dashboard and training requirement, it becomes shelfware, like the treadmill everyone swears they'll use.
A few quick hits to round out the morning. Orion, let's start with product and platform moves.
On April 14th, The Verge said Microsoft released MAI Image 2 Efficient on Microsoft Foundry and MAI Playground, positioned as faster and cheaper for production image generation. Also April 14th, TechCrunch reported OpenAI acquired Hyro Finance to build AI personal finance tools into ChatGPT-style products. Terms weren't disclosed.
Staying with Frontier Labs, what's brewing at Anthropic and what's changing in cyber access?
On April 15th, Dataconomy, citing the information, reported Anthropic may launch Claude Opus 4.7 Plus, an AI design tool for websites, presentations, and prototypes. And on April 14th, Wired covered growing industry coordination and more restricted access for security-focused AI capabilities. Coalitions, vetted users, tighter gates.
And two signals from the legal and hardware worlds.
On April 14th, Times of India reported Microsoft argued in court it shouldn't be liable for changes to ChatGPT Plus subscriptions because OpenAI sold the service. Then on April 15th, AOL noted ASML beat and raised guidance, yet shares fell as investors weighed demand outlook and China risk, still a key barometer for AI chip investment. Finally, April 15th, GovInfo Security covered a health sector coordinating council guide on managing third-party AI vendor cyber risk in healthcare.
That's XPulse AI Morning Mix from XPulse for Thursday, April 16th, 2026. Share it with someone who'd find it useful. See you next time.